Hello, this is Mr. Frank, and welcome to I Can Simplify Negative and Zero Exponents, Day 2. Here's where we are in the unit. We're on the second day. Short unit here, so we'll have that summative coming up pretty quickly. Just a quick review on negative exponents. So if you have a negative exponent, that's where there's a power, and we're multiplying a to with an exponent of negative n. We want to take the reciprocal, or we flip it, so that would become 1 over a to the n. Sometimes it's easier to look at this with numbers, so we can look at this with numbers. I'll grab a pen, that could help. So 2 to the negative 3, this is really 2 to the negative 3 over 1. So what we're doing is we're flipping this, we're taking the reciprocal. So the 1 comes from the numerator, from the denominator to the numerator, and the 2 to the negative 3 goes from the numerator to the denominator, and when we do that, we change this symbol on the exponent, this sign, to the opposite. So we take the reciprocal and take the opposite for the exponent. So here's an example. So 2 to the negative 3 would be 1 over 2 cubed. And then we would do 2 cubed. So that's the same as 2 times 2 times 2. And that would be 1 over 8. I just want to get rid of this pen here for a second, so I'm going to go back to the arrow. So 1 over 8 would be our answer. So now we can do this with numbers. We can also do this with variables. That's what this big X is for, to just remind us that we can do it with variables as well. So let's get rid of that big X and bring up an example. So we have an X to the negative 3. We're going to treat this the same way we treated the number. See how we just took the reciprocal? We did 1 over 2 to the third. We changed the sign on the exponent to the opposite. Well, we're going to do the same thing. So this would become 1 over x to the third, or x cubed. X to the third power, or x cubed. And that's it, and we're done. We can't calculate this because we don't yet know the value of x. We might be given a value of x, in which case we could calculate it. But we're done. So that's how we can do negative exponents with numbers and with a variable or a letter. So now let's do a few together. So x to the negative 2, that's the same as, let's get that pen again. So if I get that pen, that's the same as x over 1. I'm going to flip this, so I flip it to 1 over x squared. So I don't think I'm going to need that pen, so I'm going to go back to an arrow. So 1 over x squared, that's my answer. Now let's add a coefficient here. So I have 2 times x to the negative 2. I'm going to treat this x to the negative 2 the same way. But now this 2 I'm going to treat as I would normally treat it, where I'm multiplying. So this can really be broken out into 2 times 1 over x squared. Notice x to the negative 2 is 1 over x squared. And then with fractions, I can make 2 into a fraction, 2 over 1. And with fractions, I just multiply across. I multiply my numerators to get 2, multiply my denominators to get x squared, and that's my final answer. Let's do another. So now we have 1 over x to the negative 2. So we have a negative exponent in our denominator. Well, we're going to do the same thing we've always done. We're going to take the reciprocal of this, which means we flip the numerator and the denominator, and then we're going to change the power to its opposite. So I would flip this, and I'd get x squared. This could be x squared over 1, but anything over 1 is itself. So that's just simply x squared. And let's do one more here. So 3 over x to the negative 2. The only difference between these two is I changed this 1 to a 3. And just to show you here, this 3 is really 3 over 1. And then, just as I did above on this one, I'm going to multiply my numerators. 3 times 1 is 3, and 1 times... Well, oh, I'm sorry, I have to flip this first. I forgot I have to flip this. So x over 1 over x to the negative 2 becomes x squared. Becomes x squared over 1. And then I multiply my numerators and my denominators, and I get 3x squared. All right, so those are some examples. So now it's your turn. I want you to do these 3, and then once you're done, come back and we will continue. So pause here and do these 3. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. So x to the negative 4, so we're going to take the reciprocal and change the exponent to its opposite. It should be 1 over x to the 4th. And here we have 3 times x to the negative 5th. Let's think about those as two separate things. So 3 over 1. And then x to the negative fifth would be 1 over x to the fifth. And we can multiply that across just like we did. And that would be 3 over x to the fifth. And then this last one, we have 1 over x to the negative 3. We're going to take the reciprocal of that. And the reciprocal of that is simply x cubed, or x to the third power. All right, hope you did well on that. If not, you may want to rewind to the previous slide and just get a little refresher. But now let's move on to negative exponents, where we're going to convert the fraction to a decimal. So I want you to solve, and when we get a fraction, round it to the nearest hundredth. All right, so you're going to convert the fraction to a decimal. So 3 to the negative 2, we'll do this together. So 3 to the negative 2, I'm going to take the reciprocal, and I'm going to change my my exponent, the sign, to its opposite, so positive. So that will become 1 over 3 squared. 3 times 3 is 9, so I get 1 over 9. But now I want you to change this to a decimal and then round it. If I change it to a decimal and I'm rounding it, I get 0.11. Now this could, on your calculator, it should say 0.11111 and it goes on forever, but we can round to the nearest hundredth, so that would be 0.11. All right, let's do this one. 2/3 to the 0. Now, who remembers from yesterday what happens when you have a power to the 0? Any number other than 0 to the 0 power is simply 1. Remember the ray gun? Go back to yesterday's video if you're not sure of that. But everything to the 0 power except for the number 0 is going to be 1. So how about this? Negative 7 to the 0 power? Well, I just said, right? What did I just say? That's going to be 1, even if it's a negative number. That doesn't make this into a negative 1. The only way it would be a negative 1 is if the negative 1 the outside of the parentheses based on order of operations. And let's do one more. We have negative 8 to the negative 2 power. So if we need to take the reciprocal of that, right? So we're going to have negative 1 over negative 8 squared. And when you multiply two negatives, it becomes a positive. So that's 1 over 8 times 8, which is 1 over 64. But now let's change it to a decimal, and I get 0.02. It would be my decimal rounded to the nearest hundredth. All right, so now it's your turn. I want you to solve and round to the nearest hundredth these three, convert the fraction to a decimal, right, and bring your answers back to class. So pause here. I look forward to seeing your answers. All right. So welcome back. So before you go, if you can please capture what you've learned or reminded of, and questions that you have I would really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the video.